And at that point, I really questioned like where I was at. I bought into something so far that I was completely losing track of everything that actually matters in life.
Yeah.
And so I then wanted to figure out, one, what does God think about these sports? And what does the Bible say about these sports?
Yeah.
That we're investing so much time, energy, players are putting blood, sweat, and tears into this. Fans are spending outrageous amounts of money to go spectate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what started the question.
Yeah.
Do sports even matter to God?
Yeah.
So watching the game, you're super into it. And I'm not normally one of these fans that just gets riled up. I mean, if it's a close game, I love watching a close game, but I'm not this die-hard fan where I know who all the players are on the roster. I'm not that fan. I just watch the game. If we win, great. If we lose, they should have played better, and then we move on. But this game was different. I got caught up into being a true fan. Like every single down, I'm just like, why are they running this play? Why can we not be better? And after the game, after the loss, so we actually viewed it watched it at a family's house about an hour and a half from here. So I would say for a good 30 minutes of that drive, after the game's been over for an hour, 30 minutes driving, I was thinking the entire time, why could we have not been better? And running through all these different things in my head.
Yeah.
But I finally got to the point where it was either like the Holy Spirit or something just revealed to me, and just I felt guilty for how much that this was living rent free in my mind.
Right. Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
It was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And finally I was just like, man, my life goes on.
Yeah.
Like the world it is going to spin still.
Yeah.
And at that point, I really questioned like where I was at. I bought into something so far that I was completely losing track of everything that actually matters in life.
Yeah.
And so I then wanted to figure out, one, what does God think about these sports? And what does the Bible say about these sports?
Yeah.
That we're investing so much time, energy, players are putting blood, sweat, and tears into this. Fans are spending outrageous amounts of money to go spectate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what started the question.
Yeah.
Do sports even matter to God?
No, that was a great lead in. And I know we talk about our teams, but this, I mean, it extends to whatever sport, it extends to whatever your team is. The same challenge exists. And, we're not historians or anything like that, but, you've got to think, at least in some form or fashion, that competition, and whether it was like pure spectators, sporting events, have been around since the beginning of time. Probably got into huge spectators when the Coliseums and things were started getting built. I just assume, I don't know. I mean, you guys can figure that out and write it in the comments and tell me how wrong and get my research done. But one would assume. But it's been going on for a while, and so I've felt that way too. Right. And I think a lot of people feel that way. We joke about going to church on Sunday and the pastor was like, if you came to church and celebrated in church like you did Saturday in the stadium, we'd have a lot of problems solved.
What if we gave the same effort now on a player side, not even on a spectator, or vice versa? On the spectator, I think it's less effort than a player. So what if we just put what a spectator's putting in? Getting up, getting excited, and going.
Yeah.
And spending time.
Planning your whole week, your whole month.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I see where you're going with this. Okay, so let's kick us off here. And do sports matter to God? That was a great lead in. Where do you want to go from here? Like where do we want to start?
I think with not that we are any historians, that we're just talking about this, but I did just a couple Google searches just about just the history of sports. Just anyone can in the comment section throw in what you believe too, or in what you Google and search, or if you know, like if you're a historian, please throw it in the comments.
Yeah.
We'd love to read about it. But from what I can gather, just from quick Google search from a couple historian pages, that the Olympics starting in Greece. So that would have been the first big shift towards sports. Sports kind of how we know them is what I was kind of reading, with horse races, with sprints, with boxing, with throwing the javelin, these type of things. And spectators would come from all around. The big thing about these sports that I was reading is so this would have been all the BC era, is that they were all about the warrior. That we were testing warriors. We were training warriors, and you're showing through the sport who's the best warrior in preparation to the wars you're going to fight.
Interesting.
So that's how we started this. You had champions, and as Paul writes, so in Greece for the Olympics they got the wreath. That was the big thing. They got the wreath at the winning the Olympics. That was what it was all about. So then we step forward in the time, and that would be the Roman Empire. And a lot of people know from the Colosseums, the first actual stadium built, same things was happening. But the Romans did it for a different reason, and this leads into the big topic that we're talking about. The Romans did what was called bread and circus. Bread and circus is where the government will fund and use entertainment to distract the people. Also, yes, there are winners, and they're praised for winning, but the big thing for the Romans were they had a lot of issues with the Commonwealth, the peasants, you could say, wanting to start an uproar.
Yeah.
So the government itself, the entity, said, let's move and let's give out these arenas for free. You come to the Colosseum, you come to these great circuses that went from town to town, and they would give out bread for free, so free food, free entry to watch these great sports. And it took the people's minds away. So now that looks a little bit like what we have today.
A lot.
It's that some sporting events we get them for free. Some we have to pay for, but there's always food there, and it gets our mind off of the world.
Yeah.
And not just the government, it gets your mind off of everything that's going around. With work, it's a great out in life. So we move up just a little bit in history, the medieval times, where it goes back more to the warriorship, with knights fighting, with jousting, with all these just grand warriors fighting each other. Who's going to be the champion knight? Who's going to get knightship for their victory? Who's going to get estates because of their winning? And that was more for nobles, not commoners. So none of these sports we've talked about had these commoners playing in these sports. They're the top athletes, or they're the top warriors competing. So then we get to the Renaissance era. Yeah. This is where you have clubs starting with archery, with all these other sports getting involved. And this Renaissance is where commoners start participating in sports, which is great. Everybody's now participating. And then the big shift is the Industrial Revolution. So that's the late to early 1900s. And what happened was we now have leisure time. This is when the idea of 9 to 5 starts. 8 to 4 jobs, not working on the weekends. Well, what are you going to fill dead space with? So that's when sports had taken an uptick. And that's where we are today. So we have all the sports happening, and then we have technology come along with it, with radio.
Well, hold on one second.
Okay.
All right. So that's interesting, and thank you for taking me back to history. It's been a minute. So you mentioned dead time. right? What before the like sports really came in, like and filled those spaces? What were people doing in that time?
So before your industrial revolution, where all this leisure time, this dead space happened, you'd be working.
Yeah.
Commoners had to work. This industrial revolution, where you have machines that are doing a lot of the work that people were, your workforce isn't as strong. So if you'd be working in these times beforehand, your mind would be on the task at hand.
Okay.
There wouldn't be there's not going to be dead space. It's going to be taking care of your family and those type of things. That more so of an area.
Okay. I thought you were going to go with like there was more time for church or worship or
They made that would be priority.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
Because before that time, and like if you have great grandparents, please put this in the comments if your great grandparents have ever talked about this, or your great great grandparents, if you ever had stories that came up. It was they worked from sunup to sundown until it was the Sabbath, until it was or whichever day they picked for that church service. Yeah. Mostly it's gonna be Sundays, the Sabbath day.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't work. They would go to church and they would rest.
Yeah.
And then they would pick it back up on Monday.
Yeah.
Again, if you have tasks that you had to get done on Sunday, you had to do it.
Yeah.
But for Christians, that's the big part we have to, with this conversation, we have to split, is we are talking about Christians, followers of Christ. What were they doing?
Yeah.
And so that giving the time to God and making time for Him.
Yeah.
Along with your work.
Yeah.
And that's how it's been ever since, well, up until more recently.
Yeah.
That now we have this culture to where we don't work as many hours and we have this dead space. And what are we filling that with?
Yeah.
Now, granted, there's a ton of other topics we could talk about,
Yeah.
but we're just focusing on just sports.
Yeah.
Do they matter to God?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay. So that's when you say the dead space of before this leisure time that started happening, that's I would say what was happening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what is your stance on this? So, do you think sports matter to God?
My stance is sports and the outcome of winning and losing do not matter.
Tell me more.
I think, and this is where the split happens.
Yeah.
The players that played the sport, if they do not lose track of who they're playing for and why they're playing the game, then, yeah, it absolutely matters. The heart matters to God.
Yeah.
Above all else.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what sport you're in. If you're putting all of your effort, your time, but you're keeping God at the forefront and you're giving God glory and you're spreading the gospel to the team around you, if it's a team sport, if it's an individual sport, to the spectators or to the other athletes around you, absolutely, that matters. But does it matter for if a team loses or wins? No.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that one.
Yeah.
So the outcomes, they don't matter, but in terms of the pure participation and whether you play a sport or not, does God like that or does God look down on that? Is that where you're going with that, or
Right.
And so do you think by participating in a sport, is that not pleasing to God? Is that not, do you think that that's too tempting to lead you down a path of other things, or?
I think because if you look at a team or you look at how many Christian athletes are actually playing these sports, you're going into a situation that is not friendly. You're going into arenas and areas that they're not God-centered, which that's the world though. So going into these places, there is a great need We need these Christian athletes, Christian coaches leading and playing for God, leading people to Christ. Without that, yes, absolutely. If you're not surrounded, if you're the only Christian athlete on a team, man, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
I've ran with that into the military with teams before.
Yeah.
Where you're the only one,
Yeah.
and it really shakes to the core of what you believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a tough call, especially for younger athletes, because if you're not solely if you're not well-rounded, well-versed, and have experience with that, temptation is going to come, or just getting so involved in that sport and forgetting
Yeah. Yeah.
what the real purpose is.
Yeah. Well, and we talked earlier about, Paul in Corinthians, he talks about training like an athlete, right? He even references shadow boxing, which would go into boxing. So in that sense, the discipline that comes with sports, the leadership principles that come with sports, all these things, I mean, to your point, if they're worldly, God doesn't care about that. God doesn't care about, I would say, any job or career that we have, right? Sports, participation, anything. The outcome is, how are you spreading the gospel? I mean, that's ultimately what he's cared about. But where I'll take a different stance on you is the platform that is provided. And I've not seen, there are a lot of platforms, but sports provides arguably one of the greatest platforms for people to share that message. And that's one of the things that I've loved. And again, God reads the heart, and you got to see if it's genuine. But I mean, Tua, when he won the national championship, that was the first thing that he started talking about on ESPN, which was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to delete this? So, like, I love to see like these big broadcast organizations that don't want that stuff out there. And then that you have players sharing the gospel and sharing, like, giving thanks and glorifying God in that moment. And the world, you can just hear the world gulp, because they're like, it's live and we can't delete it. But I think in those moments, that's what it's about. And that's one of the biggest platforms that, and here's the thing that I've been circulating in my head throughout this whole conversation. Like, God knows everything. He designed the beginning and the end. He knows every part of your life, but he's given us free will to do those things. And it all goes back to purpose. And not everybody's designed as an athlete. Not everybody has this level of talent or size or things like that. So they're going to have a purpose in a different area of life that's going to connect them. And God's vision's not necessarily to connect to the masses, right? Your purpose may be to share it with one person who then goes on to share it with the masses. And so I in my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily the sport that matters. It's how you're using the platform. But I think and I don't want to speak for you, but when does all of this when does it take a detour from using it as a platform to now the temptation that comes along with that, and then it becomes self-worship, right? Based on, maybe I've made it a little farther, maybe I'm into some professional ranks, or these days college is professional ranks, and I'm buying into all the hype.
Well, and especially over these last few years with NIL deals,
yeah,
and with with all the money that can be made, that is one of the biggest deterrents, especially biblical sense. That, man, that's one of the biggest distractions that there is.
Yeah, yeah.
With these platforms, with going professional, or with NIL deals in college, absolutely. That. Well, let me ask a question.
Go for it.
Risk versus reward. So reward being you're spreading the gospel, which is the great reward and a kingdom purpose. The risk is falling away. Not falling away from salvation. that we won't get into that conversation, but falling away as in a sense, you're not doing the purpose you're there for anymore because you're too caught up with the world, with with money, or with this fame that you're getting from being a top athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, and this is the bigger one, this is for the younger athletes and college athletes trying to get to this pro level. What risk are you running putting all this time and effort into that?
Yeah. So I'll answer from my perspective, and I can't answer because I can't even begin to understand what some of these top college athletes and professional athletes go through on a daily basis. Like I cannot even comprehend just with our little podcast and our close to 13,000 followers, which is really good. We love every one of you.
Big.
The notifications and the comments that come through, like it can get overwhelming. I mean, sometimes, but now that's just in our little world. These guys have 22 million, 50 million.
Millions.
And they have everybody in their ear across multiple platforms on anything that they do. And so you have that distraction that's coming in. And that's something that athletes of the past didn't have to deal with, right? And so now you're having to defend yourself on every little topic, or you're having to, and so it just becomes this net that the devil has you in, right? And so that's a piece that is different these days with this topic than it has been in the past ever before. And that now you got everybody that wants a piece of the pie to make money off of you. And I don't want to go down a road here, but we've talked about this with when does the athlete start being asked to do things that go against their ethics because the dollar figure is greater than they've ever seen in their life, could give them a whole new platform, could give them everything that they've ever wanted in life. And that starts to be a little bit more tempting than stopping and God, where do I need to go in this? Give me discretion, give me guidance, give me wisdom in this.
You brought up two very, very important things that with going through the history that I wanted to bring up, and this is a great time to do it. You talked about with the devil and influence. So going back to the Romans, remember that they're using the games not just for sport, for viewership, but it's a distraction. It's entertainment. And that's what sports are.
Yep.
They're entertainment. They are a distraction. We can all, I think, put in the comments, are they? I mean, are we right in saying that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a distraction, no doubt.
And it's entertainment. It is entertaining. And if governments can implement that to distract people, do you not think that the devil would use that to distract us from God?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so and that goes back to this risk. So all these temptations, exactly what you're talking about, when you were talking, it sounded almost as if with these big contract corporations or on that side that, man, it sounds like just temptation. It sounds like when Jesus is in the wilderness, when he's tempted, I'll give you all these things. I'll give you all the riches, all this land. Just one thing.
Yeah. Deny.
And to me, once you get to that level, I think that's where your risk really starts coming in.
Yeah. Well, the good news is we always have the gift of grace. So even if you go that direction, there is the gift of grace and forgiveness, and there's always open arms.
That's right.
But that and this is the Fit Fat Dad podcast, and as a father, my dream, I think it's every athlete's dream that they're going to have children that love sports as much as they do, and they're going to go on and just keep the bar keep it going, achieve further than they've ever done. I mean, look at the great lineages, right? Like the Watt brothers, right? Like that's every dad's, like, kind of, if you're a sports guy, that's every dad's dream. But the more I see what's going on, and at mental depression as high as it is for this generation because of social media and the bullying and just everybody's in every piece of your business, and then the corruption that's going on that's forcing the greatest coaches, leaders, influencers of men and women to leave the game, something is infiltrating that arena, right? Faster than it's ever done before. And so now that desire as a father, it's not as strong anymore because I see what it's doing, because it goes from the thing which sports was graded on, which was to, you mentioned earlier, build and define the greatest warrior, right? Well, warrior qualities included, like, at its core, some of the finest qualities of men and women, right?
That's right.
And I'm not saying that these competitions generated the best person ever, but there was a lot of forging that had to happen, and you had to get rid of a lot of different things, and now it just seems that that's almost the opposite of where that is. So okay, so we're kind of drifting here a little bit, but pick us back up, Judd.
All right, let's start with a question. Would the kingdom of God be more impactful if there were no sports? So,
give me an example of impactful.
Would we, as Christians, would we be able to reach more people if sports were completely out of the question? I know this is a hypothetical. Like, sports are never going to disappear. Would we be more impactful? And put it in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that if sports were completely eliminated off the table, and this leisure time that we have now throughout the world, if we filled it with, I know we'll fill it with something else.
Yeah.
But if sports were off the table, do you think the kingdom is more impactful? Or do you think people is just going to find their own outs and it's not more impactful? What do you think?
Well, I go back to what's going to take its place, right? Just there's always going to be some level of mass entertainment value in this commerce world we live in that somebody's going to sell, that's going to take people's attention away. But and I'm biased in this. I don't think that there's been anything as close to competition and tradition and loyalty to a team and to a fan base as sporting events. People tie their lives into this. It's things stop on a Saturday, and there's things that I will not do. If you want to get married in the South and you do it on a Saturday, nobody's going to come to your wedding. Like, that's the type in the fall. That's the type of things that, and probably like that in these high pocket other areas of professional sports on a Sunday. Like, those are the types of things that are realities and that are true. And we haven't even gotten on a global level where the biggest sport is football, right, and soccer, which is a whole nother level of fandom from a just pure international standpoint.
Oh, they're just as crazy about soccer.
More crazy in
the world than we are about football.
Yeah. We just have a little bitty. We're a speck compared to that level of just pure fandom. But here's my take. I still can't get past the, like, God knows that he knew that there are no surprises to God. So I not knowing what would take its place, I do think that the platform that sports has provided a lot of athletes to share their positive stories of how God moved through them, their positive stories of just connecting with people that may have never heard the gospel ever. That platform reaches millions upon millions upon millions of people. And there are, like, just look at Kirk Cousins, man. Like, I love hearing that guy talk. I had no idea prior to that Netflix documentary that that's how he was, but now I just, like, I feed off that. And then C.J. Stroud, Jalen Hurts, Tua, and I know I'm talking only football players. There's a lot of them out there. Mm-hmm. And then I've come into an organization with, you know, my alma mater and guys that have played football there and that have gone into the NFL, that have started organizations that are reaching these men and women that have the finances to start these programs that reach out to children in areas that there is no gospel, there is no infiltrating. The extremist terrorist places of the world because of that platform. So I'm taking the stance that it's hard to say that without sports it wouldn't be as impactful, because then you're saying like that you're removing God from the equation and sports is the king. So I'm not going to say that, but I think the platform in terms of what's and how many people it reaches, I do think it is impactful for that.
And I take the other side on this one.
But hit me with it.
So the other side is, yes, the platform and the people on there that you just, the list goes on of those type of athletes that are proclaiming the gospel. What's the number of athletes that aren't?
Well, isn't that the harvest though, man? Like that.
No, and it is. But how many, and this is why I'm saying if you took it off the table, how many more people are playing there and being distracted just by the sport? Then the people that's doing the right thing, like Kirk Cousins, like these type of athletes that are doing the right thing and proclaiming the gospel through it. But you have all these other millions of athletes just there as a distraction of the sport.
Yeah.
And that's my side. And there's not a right answer to this.
There's not.
But that is my side from the opposite end.
Yeah. Well, I keep going back. I don't think it's the players that are the distraction. It's the creation of what we're watching, right? The competition, and the players are involved within that. But again, and I go back to opportunity. You know what I mean? Like it feels like it's a great opportunity to reach a lot of people. I don't know. That's kind of, it's one that flickers around. The can just kind of trickles around in the
right. Yeah,
the attic up there.
That's kind of where we come to is it goes back to the kind of the very beginning we talked about the risk and the reward.
Yeah.
And on this, though, would we do away with sports? That is up to y'all in the comments because we have two different opinions on this.
So would you, like, tomorrow, if you had the ability to say sports are going away, would you do it?
Yes.
You would?
Yep.
And then all these things that, you know, so
and I'm sorry.
Our wives would be out of jobs.
Yeah, our wives are out of jobs. Sorry. But what I'm saying in that sense is not that we would eliminate this. We would eliminate sports how they are now. I think at the college and the professional, we do away with it. For kids to play and to compete, yeah. But now, not how it is now with how this with sports going year round, the same sport year round, putting all this time and effort with parents taking their kids to so many practices throughout the week where that's kind of the distraction on a personal level that we find with people across the entire world, especially America, where parents are going from practice to practice to practice. and to eliminate more so of that, because there's not something you're working towards. There's not these athletic scholarships you'd be working towards. There's not this professionalism in these sports you'd be working towards. It's just to have fun and to play the sport. And then you move on. Not that adults can't play the sports too, but it's not at this high risk level. It's more so just for this leisure. Hey, we're going to go have some fun on the weekend.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to counter that.
Okay.
And I feel like if you say we have to take away sports because they're a distraction, then you've got to take away everything that is entertainment. I mean, might as well remove Netflix. You might as well remove local TV news. You might as well remove anything that has any level of entertainment value. Then you should just remove it and just absolutely purge it. You might as well remove everybody's career, because that's taking 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week. That's getting you focused on something else. So I don't think you can just isolate sports, because there's so many other things that do the same thing. And I go back to the very beginning, Adam and Eve in the garden. God told them to do one thing, or he told them not to do one thing, right? And so there was distractions in the beginning. The serpent came up, right? And the serpent it convinced Eve to take the apple, right? Oh, if you just eat from this tree of knowledge of good and evil, then you'll see what God sees, and you don't have to be relying on that. So that's been there. The distraction has been there from the beginning. And I don't think you can get away from that by just eliminating sports, because something else is going to fill the void.
Right. And that's the hard part to this conversation, is keeping it isolated.
Yeah.
This is when I was thinking about this question, that always came up in my mind was, man, if you eliminate this, there's something going to take its spot. And social media, to me, that would be another topic for another day. Yeah. That would be the thing. Well, before I took away anything else, if it was up to me, before I took away anything else, that'd be the one.
Yeah.
If there was actually something that should be gone, and again, it does have the same characteristics. There are good things about social media. Keeping up with people and using your platform for good.
Yeah.
But then it goes back to the same thing with sports.
Yeah.
What's that risk?
Yeah. Well, I think the risk is going to be there regardless. Anytime your platform gets elevated, the risk of self-worship, and I know everybody's victim to that. Everybody likes to feel good about themselves. If you get some love going in, you get some likes, you get some attention, now you feel good.
Man, I'm something. I'm something.
Yeah. And I know God didn't just create us to sit here and be like, don't ever feel good about yourself. Don't ever do anything other than just sit there and God didn't design us to sit in a corner of a room and just be like in full prayer and 24/7. Like, God knows your heart. That's why we have the Holy Spirit in us, who's always with us. He wants a relationship. He wants you to check in and just and speak frequently, and he's going to lead you into these things. He wants us to enjoy. I go back to the beginning. Like, he created all these great things, and we have all these great things that are God created. He created everything in the world, but that's where the free will comes in. And I think this is the point of all your things, and maybe we should have restructured is your free will more tempted in sporting events than other events, and big time sporting events, just based on the amount of little g worship that occurs within sporting events.
Right. And with going with this question, we can't just throw sports out the window.
Yeah.
It's a fun question.
Yeah,
What would
yeah.
happen if sports went away? Does it help the kingdom? Does it hurt it? We have to have solutions though. Obviously, sports are getting out of control with parents and spectators and players going to all these different events to trying different avenues to get the success. What are some solutions that we could actually put in place that would mitigate some of these issues? Not that we're doing away with sports, not that we're telling you not to go play sports, because the attributes of sports with leadership and working hard for something and being a part of a team, something bigger than yourself, those are all very good attributes. But what are some solutions from all the distraction standpoint? How can we fix that?
You won't fix it.
You don't think there's any way to mitigate on a personal level?
On a personal level, but a personal level that's with anything that you do, right? Like that's now getting back to, are you walking the path that God leads you down, and then as you stray, are you coming back? Like that's the journey throughout, right? But there's nothing that can be done that you're just going to.
I think so. I've written down just a couple things, and some things we can talk about. I think solutions is really take an inward look on yourself. Are you making it an idol? Like really look at, and this is any part of your life. This could be with sports. This could be with work. I think we need to take a step back and look at what we're really doing.
I see where you're going here. Okay.
Yeah. So then this is the fix. It's like, let's take a step back and look at what we're doing as athletes. Let's take a step back. What are we really doing these sports for? And then let's slow down the pace. And it's hard as athletes. We know that we are very fast-paced people, especially in America. My gosh, we are one thing to the next, one thing to the next. And I think with our athletes, that we need to slow down with our athletes.
Yeah, this is so that I misunderstood your question. I thought like, how do we fix the sports problem? I'm like, you're never going to fix that. But right. And you mentioned this with the example of the Rose Bowl, but there was, and again, we just speak from what we know, but Alabama fan, got it. Roger lived through the greatest era of Alabama football with Coach Saban. I never played it down. Greatest contribution I've ever made is turning on the television, buying some merchandise, apparel, going to a few games.
That's it.
I had no impact on the game. No. If you were to ask my wife if I believe that, she would say absolutely not. Like based on how I respond, how I yell and scream at the TV, the comments I make at a certain coordinators or players that aren't living up to my fandom. Kickers. But I'm not in the facility. I am a former college athlete, so I understand the process, maybe not their process. I do understand the time, the work, the commitment. But I'm just an armchair quarterback, right?
Right.
But I said this in a crazy way, and I go back to I had nothing to do with it. But you feel anytime your team does exceptionally well, like historically well, and the expectation is not just have a good season, it's win the thing every year, and everything's short of that is a failure. And then there's this whole everybody on the outside wants to chirp anytime that your team doesn't win, and that creates a lot of pressure for everybody. And it was almost like this when he retired. It's like now it's okay if Alabama. It's not okay if they lose, but it's like it's a change, and it things like this happen. And I almost had the thought that, like, all right, it's time to put down the little G God now. Like that now I can put it down because this unrealistic expectation. But that was a humbling moment for me. And I've had this conviction every year, and it's been something that I've never been able to conquer. It's like, it is a little g God, and it's admittedly gets more worship, it gets more excitement than I have been on Sundays. I've never gone into a church and screamed like I have on a Saturday. Now I have spent some incredibly intimate moments with God and had incredibly just pure moments that you can't even begin to explain. And no doubt about it, my heart is on fire for Christ. That is something that you feel, and that I've never felt that for sports.
Yeah.
Put it from an outward experience and the way that it's overcome me. Yeah, I mean, that's a conviction moment.
Yeah, you bring up, when was the last time you woke up early on a Sunday morning and you were excited to go and worship God? That's something to me that when we get, just like today, going out, I'm going kayaking, woke up early. It's one of my favorite hobbies to do. But I woke up early, make sure I have everything, double, triple checked I have everything, checking the water levels, making sure everything's right. And man, I don't do that for Sundays.
Yeah.
I don't wake up and that's where I think where we try to we need to be reminded. And we need to take that step back and really look at the things we're doing, and then also just take a step back and look to God, who's given us all these great things. Sports, they're so entertaining to watch. But man, don't let it take over your life. With kayaking, don't let it take over my life. When it's time to go, we can go do it. But so you want to ask the original question that we started this whole thing off with.
Do sports
matter to God?
Well, and here, and then we'll close here. But here's something that has just kind of been just toying around in my brain, and I've mentioned it on prior podcasts, right? Like, we get this vision of this Old Testament God that is, you do it my way, or it's fire and fury, and I'm wiping out an entire civilization and then their generations if you sin, right? And God is so holy that he cannot live in the presence of sin. So he loves you, but he can't be around sin. People need to understand that. That's why there's Jesus, right? As a mediator.
Absolutely.
Who has taken on that sin and freed us from that sin. Absolutely. So now we can connect with God the Father. So that those things kind of ruminate in my head. I got to see where
God, this entire time, I've been doing kind of a overall summary of the Bible, walking through a lot of the high points throughout the entire Bible. What I've come to realize is, ever since the beginning with Adam and Eve, when what God had made was good, God is just trying to get it back to that point himself. He is the one that is trying to get it back, because there's no way we ever could. Yeah. With the Old Testament, with the Old Covenant, moving to Jesus with his new covenant, making a way for us. He is just trying to get it back to how it's supposed to be, where it was good. And this next life and this next experience we get to have with him, this eternal life, is going to be great. Yeah. And he's just trying to get us there.
And that's it. And that goes back to the point I was trying to make, is that you go back to this just like fire and brimstone God. If you sin, that's what it is. But the more I get deeper into my relationship with Christ, I'm learning that God doesn't want you to sin because he just doesn't like it, and he doesn't want you to have fun. He knows that what his plan is for you is filled with 10 times more enjoyment. It's filled with 100 times more excitement. It's filled with 100 times more just joy and less stress. And that's why he doesn't, because he knows that's where you need to be, because that's going to give you the best life and most fruitful life possible. But then the world intercepts and distractions intercept, and we get entertained. And it's not like these things are inherently bad. right? But then they become worship that takes us off of that path, right? And then that's when the manifestation of other things that can just get us into this path that just gets us off. And that's why and it hurts God's heart, because he knows what you could be doing.
It is taking away the relationship that he wants.
Right.
And again, we're not saying playing sports is sinful. We're not saying that social media is sinful. We're not saying that over the Netflix. We're not saying those things are terrible. But what we are saying is, check yourself and check how that may be impeding on how you're living for God and building that relationship.
Yeah, no doubt. We've got to get out of this world where this is us and God circles us. And we need to be where, this is God and we circle God. And that's
I think it's said best in the Bible, we are in the world, but we're not
of the world. Yeah. So no, man, this has been fun, dude. I appreciate that. This has been a level of 2024 thinking that I need, and I know we didn't land on any direction. We never will, but hopefully this allowed you to think about things and diagnose, where am I at, right? Like, where am I allowing these things to? And it may not be sports; it could be other things that have these kind of ties in your soul that
absolutely
are linked in there, and
sports is something we can all relate to.
Yeah,
but relate it back to your life.
Yeah,
and how it impacts you.
Yeah. So appreciate it. We're out.
Out.